Heard some things that were encouraging from Baton Rouge this weekend. They had their first scrimmage. I know there were a lot of big fears. When Ed Orgeron brought in 2 new coordinators, obviously the fear coming off of a season like last year is there just won't be any cohesiveness. We won't have our act together. We will not have improved a lot, and whatever these new coordinators bring, it just doesn't stick. I think it's pretty safe to say we can set those fears aside. Heard plenty enough good things on both sides of the ball to indicate that at the very least the roots have started to take here. So now we find out how big a tree we can grow, and now we dive in a little bit. Sounds like from yesterday's feedback at least, Max Johnson had a pretty good day. Garrett Nussmeier did some really good things. Probably had better numbers, probably in a lot more favorable situation as a quarterback. LSU loves their depth and their skill at wide receiver, and I don't think it's all the guys that you would see listed as starters when you flip open your favorite preview magazine. And I go over to Go 24/7 today, and I was reading Sonny Ship's day after scrimmage intel, and he started to mention that as well. He started to talk about a couple of guys, Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors. Those are 2 young names. Most of you don't know them if you're outside of Baton Rouge. But those are guys who are making moves on incumbents right now. That's one of the most fun things to watch in fall camp when you've got those all caps guys, which means they're returning players. And then you got the lowercase guys, which mean they're true freshmen. And then you start to see them creeping. There is no rule that says you got to wait your turn. There is no rule that tells Brian Thomas or Malik Neighbors, well, you're a good player, you got some skill, but pat you on the head, we'll see you next year as a sophomore. I think they're going to play this year. They may end up locking down starting jobs before the year's over because those guys are playing far too well to be ignored. And so that's one of the really good pieces of feedback early from LSU. There are differing schools of thought on this offensive line. This LSU offensive line is not going to be a Joe Moore Award winner this year. Joe Moore is what I just said almost. So if I'm going to clip this later, I need to say it right. I don't think this LSU offensive line has the potential to be the best in the country, Joe Moore Award, etc. But what I do think is there are some differing schools of thought, and I'm not nailed down on either one of them yet. There's one school of thought that would say, from, let's say, the coaching staff's point of view, we have 5 or 6, 7, 8, well past 5 guys that we feel confident we can put on the field. Now, you notice the trepidation in my voice as I say that, because I think it's very guarded, because at the same time, I think the staff knows they're looking around and they're not really seeing any All-Americans scattered across either the 1 or 2 deep, but they know they got guys we can put out there. It's better than just throwing warm bodies out there. But it's somewhere in between the warm body and the future All-American, serviceable. That's what they're looking at, serviceable. And so there are going to be some weak links on this offensive line, even if they're healthy. Dare Rosenthal's out at left tackle, probably the only true left tackle kind they had. Now, it's not going to be a blind side. They got a left-handed quarterback starting this year. But at the same time, I think that's a unit that stands to potentially be exposed at times. It's a weakness. It's a flaw. What have we talked about this whole show? There is no flawless team. I just spelled it out with Alabama, spelled it out with Texas. I'll spell it out with Ohio State later this week. This is not a year where we're entering a season where you have a bunch of all-world, elite, flawless teams out there. That's never the case, but it's especially not the case this year. You can win a championship with flaws on your team this year. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So this doesn't rule LSU out of anything. Now, having said that, they got a long way to go. They certainly have a long way to go, but there's no flawless team out there. And so yesterday, defense shined. Seems like it shined all over the country. But yesterday, LSU secondary and their defense overall, their one defense played very well. I think Ali Gay had a very good day. But in the secondary, they were without Derek Stingley. They were without Eli Ricks. They were without McLaughlin, I don't think played yesterday. Those are 3 big-time defensive backs for LSU. All of them could do something in the way of awards, semifinalists, finalists at the end of the year. They got that kind of upside. None of them played yesterday. The thinking is all of them will be back well before the season starts. They'll probably all suit up against UCLA. But the key here for LSU is now and is going to be buy time so you can keep developing. Because if you look at LSU's schedule, it's a little bit different. They don't dive into the deep end like Georgia does, for example. Now, they're going to play a tough game on the road to start the year, but I think we can all agree there are tougher draws if you're going to go on the road than going to the Rose Bowl and playing UCLA. But look at how it lines up, or listen if you're on podcast. They go to UCLA, favored in that game. They play McNeese at home. They play Central Michigan at home. Then they go to Mississippi State. So after week 1, the next truly losable game that you have is week 4, and still it's at Mississippi State. The meat of the conference schedule hasn't arrived yet. Then you get Auburn at home, then you go to Kentucky, and then it's go time. You got Florida, you got Ole Miss, you got Bama, you got A&M at the end of the season. The point being, the run game is paramount right now. Davis Price, I don't think, played yesterday. Emory did some decent things. If they can ride the running game, and I'm not totally sure they can yet. They're hopeful. Not totally sure they can. If they can ride that running game, and then they can start to bring some of those young receivers along, and they don't have a catastrophic, disastrous start on the offensive line that ends up, -3, -4 turnovers in a game, and they have a freak upset, by the time they get to that game against Florida, we'll know what kind of team LSU has. They will be favored in every game until then. They've got the pieces on this team to be undefeated until then. They got the pieces on this team to be undefeated when they go into Tuscaloosa to play Alabama. They also got enough legitimate concern where they could be a multi-loss team by the time they go play Alabama. The most fun team to watch, the most high-variance team in America this year, the LSU Tigers.